If anyone tries to stop us,
An incident occurred while the ALS was cruising. Hijackers threatened the lives of passengers. How should the crew respond? What was the hijackers' motive? Could they be rescued? In this issue, let's experience this thrilling hijacking. On the 7th of March, 1983, Balkan Bulgaria Airlines Flight 013 had taken off from Sofia Airport in Bulgaria, bound for Varna Airport in Bulgaria. On board were 40 passengers and 4 crew members, including Captain Ilya Lalov and co-pilot Klemen Starev. This is a popular domestic route in Bulgaria, attracting a large number of tourists visiting the Black Sea each year. At that moment, a passenger in the cabin appeared to be vomiting uncontrollably. His companion, Jen Jong, quickly pressed the call light. Valentina Yurdanova, the only flight attendant on board, approached to inquire. However, 2 men took advantage of the situation and seized the passenger. 2 passengers were also held hostage by 2 men in the back seat. The hijackers' imminent destruction terrified the flight attendants, and the passengers were stunned. The hijacker threatened again. "We just left prison. We have nothing to throw away. We will break the windows. We will destroy this plane. If we must. The plane is 45 minutes from landing. The crew is completely unaware of the situation inside the cabin. We must inform the plane. You must let me go to the front of the plane." "No, inform the pilot now." There was an intercom outside the cabin door. The hijacker didn't release the flight attendant, leaving him to fend for himself. No one dared to stand up, fearing they would provoke the hijacker. The tension was suffocating, and no one dared to step out. The hijacker ordered an officer to inform the crew and convey their request to fly to Vienna. Inside the cockpit, there was a knock on the door. The captain signaled the co-pilot to remain alert and confirm the door before opening. The captain, seeing a soldier, immediately opened the cabin door. The officer explained the situation inside the cabin and the hijackers' demands. The 2 crew members felt the situation was serious. They couldn't reach Vienna in their current state. The plane only had enough fuel for an hour's flight. The location of Flight 013. The flight was at least 885 kilometers from Vienna, a distance of at least 2 hours. The crew's temporary solution was to calm the hijackers and prevent unnecessary passenger casualties. The co-pilot announced to the hijackers their demand to fly to Vienna. The hijackers relented after hearing the announcement, and the crew's destination was Istanbul, Turkey. The delaying tactics had proven effective. The co-pilot then went to the cockpit to negotiate with the hijackers. The hijackers insisted on flying to Vienna. Even after the co-pilot's request to stop for refueling, the hijackers refused to compromise. The co-pilot had to cautiously return to the cockpit. In 1983, most of Eastern Europe was under Soviet control. Since the beginning of the Cold War, large numbers of people had attempted to flee to the West Delhi. Negotiations failed, and the crew had no alternative but to notify ground control. The furious hijacker lost control, terrifying the passengers. Bulgarian authorities quickly established a crisis team to address the hijacking. Their solution was to have special agents board the plane and storm it. At this point, the hijacker noticed the plane hadn't turned and began to lose control. The situation became increasingly urgent. The crisis team decided to proceed with Flight 013's flight plan. Facing the hijackers, the team acted relentlessly. The crew, bewildered by the command, didn't know what to do. They requested a wide turn from the control tower to scare the hijackers. With approval, they began executing a series of maneuvers. Sure enough, they were fooled, temporarily easing the hijackers' nerves. Unbeknownst to them, the plane continued eastward. The hijackers, with their erratic voices, sensed something was amiss, but they couldn't confirm the plane's turn. They could only shout threats and intimidation. The plane soon arrived at Varna Airport. The co-pilot decided to return to the cabin, using all his sorcery to convince the hijackers that this was a threat. The co-pilot, refusing to speak, retreated to the cockpit. With 15 minutes remaining from the airport, the crisis team scrambled to formulate a response plan. They decided to have the crew circle overhead to buy more time. After receiving instructions from the air traffic controller, Flight 013, They began circling over the Black Sea north of the airport. They still had at most an hour to go. The crew also realized that the hijackers would eventually discover Varna's coastline. The consequences of being discovered would be disastrous. The co-pilot suddenly had a crazy idea. Turn off all the lights along the coastline. After receiving the request, the crisis team began preparing to shut off all power in the city and surrounding areas, leaving only the airport power supply. Flight 013 had only 500 kilograms of fuel left, regardless of whether the lights could be turned off or not. They had to land before the fuel ran out. Time ticked by, and the risk grew rapidly. Ground control had also completed the power outage coordination. At 7:30 p.m., Varna's power supply was completely cut, including the lights of ships along the coast. The air traffic controller notified the crew, "Prepare for entry. Target runway 27, Balkan 013. We will begin our descent towards Vienna in 5 minutes. Everything is ready." What lies ahead is unknown. As you can see, we've begun our descent towards Vienna. We'll be on the ground in just a few minutes. Everyone should sit down and fasten their seat belts now. The hijacker, gazing at the sea below, began to roar. "I don't see Vienna. That is the Danube. We are almost in Vienna." The plane is getting closer and closer to the airport. When it's 9.26 kilometers from the airport, the crew notices that the landing gear indicator light is not low. The checklist states that the landing gear should be checked by the tower during a low altitude approach, but this would likely be detected by the hijackers. However, they can only hold out for 3 minutes at most. The crew needs to make a quick decision. They conclude that it's just a light problem. The landing gear is already down. Okay, let's get down to 500 for precision. Approach to runway 27. The crisis team's plan is to land on taxiway island 4 and wait for the Secret Service to board and rescue them. It's either capture or death. The runway is right in front of them. The hijackers are convinced that the plane is about to land at Vienna airport. "We are almost there. When we land in Vienna, you should come with us." I just can't. "My family will be waiting for me to get back." Flight 013 stops at taxiway island 4. The first officer enters the cabin. The hijackers demanded that Austrian customs officials board the plane. The crisis team immediately arranged for 2 airport employees to board the plane, but finding someone who could speak the language proved difficult. The hijackers, seemingly realizing something, quickly had their accomplices take the flight attendants to the restroom. In case of an emergency, they had a bargaining chip. Please, don't hurt me. Please, they said. At this point, 2 officers, disguised as Austrian customs officials, entered the plane. In the cabin, they're not Austrian. "Look, he's wearing a Bulgarian jacket." The crew member was exposed. The situation was escalating. They lied. Go, Valentine, kill her now." The flight attendants' lives were in danger, as were those of everyone else on board. The hijackers could attack them at any moment. "Now, they will kill the passengers," the co-pilot shouted. The Secret Service officers stationed outside immediately rushed into the cabin. Without further ado, the 3 hijackers surrendered on the spot. "There's another one in there. He's going to kill the flight attendant." The situation was hopeless. The hijacker was shot. Flight attendant Bergen received a laceration, but fortunately, his life was not in danger. After more than 2 hours, the hijacking was finally over, and all passengers were rescued. Investigators later learned that the 4 hijackers all had minor criminal records. 2 of them had military service, some even before they had left the service. Seeing no hope for their lives, they chose to hijack the plane and flee to Vienna. Hours before takeoff, they hid the knives they had purchased in their belts and evaded security checks 15 minutes apart. Lax airport security allowed them to slip through, believing they could apply for asylum in Vienna after hijacking the plane. However, their dreams were shattered. While 1 person died, the remaining 3 received prison sentences ranging from 7 to 10 years. In the 40 years since the incident, the co-pilot has been promoted to captain, and the flight attendant, after recovering for a few weeks, returned to duty and continued serving for another 17 years.
If you like the video, then like and subscribe the channel.